That kind of makes the point very, very well. So I think now we're cooking. I'll just make sure. All right. So hopefully you can see this if you're on my Patreon page. I just want to fill you in very quickly with kind of what I'm wanting to try to do this year. Is I really want to spend some time talking to interesting people who are doing interesting things. I want to interview artists and academics and activists. I want to create a space on the platform where other people can do courses and book studies. So, it'll take me a while to get there, but I want to start. And so this is kind of the first of those. I get to...
So honored.
Yeah, no way. I'm honored. I'm nervous. I get to interview my friend Maggie Rowe, who I think the first time we met, you came to an event at Three Clubs.
At Three Clubs, yeah.
Which event was that an all-day thing, or was
It was. I feel like it was on absurdity. Was it on the absurd?
On the absurd. That sounds a bit right.
I feel like that's what it was. Anyway.
There is a great little club that was just around the corner from now I know from where you live as well.
Yeah.
But just around the corner from where I live, and I actually did some events there. I would do a thing called Parables and Pints, and also did a one-day event, and I remember that clearly because you on that day told me about that you were a cult leader.
I'm a cult leader.
Yeah,
yes.
and that really interested me, and it was my kind of cult because it was a cult that promised you everything. It promised you certainty and satisfaction, prosperity.
Yes, our slogan is, if you've ever wanted something that you did not have, then Pure Sphere is for you.
Wow.
Pure Sphere is I'm not sure if I should be talking about.
Yeah, well, far ahead, and we'll definitely circle back to it a bit more, but give them a...
So basically, Pure Sphere, it comes from our sacred symbol, which is the pyramid within a sphere. The sphere is the earth, and the pyramid is what you climb up till you get to the pinnacle where there is no longer any pain and you have constant fulfillment.
Wow.
That's what Pure Sphere promises.
Fantastic. So we are going to come back to that. We're going to talk a little bit about that this new religion, which sounds even more promising than Scientology. It's
so less work. Scientologists
Okay, you don't have to pay.
You don't have to pay. You just have to believe that you will get what you want to get.
Wow.
And then you will get it.
Very good.
That
okay,
easy.
That sounds good. Well, Maggie, you were an actor for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you still do any of that?
I do occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what brought you to LA, or?
Yeah, I went to grad school out here for acting, which sounds like a crazy thing.
Yeah.
But so that's why I came out here.
So you came out. You did a degree in acting, and then
a degree. Yeah.
And then went into the acting world for a while.
Because
for a little bit. So many people come to LA to act, and most have to leave in a year or two because LA is so expensive and so difficult.
Yes.
So you were able to survive.
Yeah, I sustained it for a little while. Did a series of McDonald's commercials, which were kind of my bread and butter for a bit.
Did you do one or two and then you became a regular?
Yeah, I did a bunch of them. It was when they were selling they're now Fitbits, but at the time they just measured the number of steps that you took, and it was when McDonald's wanted to have a healthier image. So I was the lady with the step counter.
Oh, wow.
A bunch of different commercials.
Very good. You have a good friend, our friend Andrew Delman, who's a very good friend of Elliot's actually, but he does a number of things. He's a stand-up comedian, but he also does adverts, and he did a big advert with the Pizza Hut, and it's so weird. Every time the advert comes on, like, there's Delman. So, very good. But you acted, but then got into writing, and then kind of wrote film scripts, TV scripts.
Yeah, wrote a few film scripts, and recently I was working on the show Flaked on Netflix with Will Arnett, and Arrested Development, and I wrote a film based on Pure Sphere, which was basically a film. The idea was that it was a disbeliever coming in to challenge Pure Sphere and expose all of its ills and wrongdoings. But then ultimately what's revealed is that Pure Sphere has funded the whole thing, and the investigative reporter becomes a convert. And the idea is, because I remember when I was growing up as an evangelical Christian, the people that they would most look to would be atheists who came in to question Christianity and then got so into it that they went, hey, this really is true. And those were the people that like kind of cemented the belief system the most. So the idea was to do the same thing with Pure Sphere, is take on everyone's questions about it. Like, what, you think you can just never have any pain in life? You know, all these different reasonable objections. And then by the end, those were all answered, and the idea was...
Well, that's why Christopher Hitchens, I think, and maybe this is a rumor, but I think that he kind of wrote down officially that he did not have a bedside conversion at the end of his life, because he said a lot of Christians love their story of the crazy atheist who on their deathbed finally got, and he said, I don't want to be part of that narrative, so I'm just letting you all know that hasn't happened. Because I think they say that about Darwin, that's a rumor that goes around, that at the end of his life.
Right, that Darwin still believed in natural selection, but believed that it was somehow controlled by something bigger, supposedly.
So did you do that as it was like, what do you call, like a documentary with handheld cameras? And so it was done as like a mockumentary type thing?
Yeah, but we tried to make it, you know, really walk that line, like really good mockumentaries do, like Spinal Tap does, where it would take you a while to realize that it was a satire, you know, so trying to play it as seriously as possible.
Yeah.
And that's what we did for all the videos that we made. So we made probably 200 or 300 videos that we would release weekly on our different... Pure Sphere had 21 tenets, and we would get different people to do testimonials on them. Like we had... Sacred Ignorance, that which you do not see does not exist. And it was all about turning a blind eye to anything that you don't want to see in your life.
Because there's a guy who's a contemporary guy who seems to be doing something similar, and you'll know his name, but he pretends to be, like, he's got the long hair, and he will say, you know, how to be a great vegan. And he'll say, you know, always talk about veganism at every point you can. Have you seen his videos?
I don't think
No, he's very good. But it sounds like you were, you know, doing something like kind of a similar kind of thing, sending up a lot of these notions.
Right. These ideas. One of the tenets was that we called it sacred shopping. And it was the idea that the universe is your Sky Mall catalog, and it's time to rack up some credit card purchases. But the idea that a lot of these kind of prosperity theologies look at it like as if you could strong arm the universe into giving you what you want, and it's kind of this spiritual materialism of, you know, if I believe blah blah blah, then I can get this.
Which has this really dark underbelly of, like, if your life is going badly, it's because you're not thinking correctly. You know?
Right, like all the people in Darfur, like, they're just shitty visualizers.
Yeah, you just got to imagine the world as a sky mall and you'll be fine.
It's manifested so shittily.
Yeah. So you're literally saying, like, you made hundreds of, like, these short videos.
These short videos.
And was that in the run up to the documentary?
Yeah.
As kind of almost like viral kind of little hints.
Yeah.
And then, so how did you, like, raise the money for this, or what happened? Who was behind it?
So great. We started off. The way that it all started was I was doing a variety show. I was producing a variety show called Pretty Good Show. The idea was that it was a pretty good show, and it ended up being just that. It wasn't great, but it was a pretty good show. And we did one sketch about Pure Sphere. And then one of our producers put up the money for us to do these kind of different videos elaborating on this idea. And then him and his partner funded the documentary film.
Wow.
So I was very lucky to be able to do it and take one small idea and really explore it.
Yeah. And so were you the sole writer or the main writer, or was there a team?
I had a partner. I played the role of Gossamer. Gossamer was not the founder of Pure Sphere, but the rediscoverer of Pure Sphere. The idea was that all these people throughout history, Noah and Beethoven and Sylvester Stallone, like all these people had actually known about Purosphere but couldn't articulate it. And my character was the one who rediscovered it. So I played that, and then my partner played somebody named Coyote, and he was the trickster of our religion. And the two of us created it together. His name was Anderson Gabrick. Yeah.
Very good. And then did the document, did you put it into festivals? That
Yeah,
kind of, or
so
did you
we
release it mostly online? Or
No, we went to a bunch of festivals, and I always tried to get it into a traditional documentary category because I thought it would be fun to try to kind of pass it off as real.
Yeah.
But we ended up having more success doing it as a comedy. I mean, that is what it is. I just thought it would be the most subversive if people thought it was real, and then we're like, and which a lot of people did. When we released the videos, we got just tons of comments, and some people were really angry and was like, this is bullshit, you know? You're telling people that they could be happy all the time? That's bullshit, you know? Like,
yeah.
And then people inquired about how they could find out more information sincerely. And
wow.
we went to a couple of kind of spiritual festivals where we had a booth. So we tried to sell it as if it were, and our opening line really did get people interested. What do you have you ever wanted something that you did not have? And if you don't think about it, of course it's like, yes, all the time.
Yeah.
Everything that I don't want, I don't have.
Yes.
I mean, everything I want, I don't have.
Really, exactly. Yeah. You can only want what you don't have. Right. So you're gonna. Everyone's like, got it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have you ever felt sadness in your life? Yeah, it's
yes.
Universal.
Yeah.
Very good. And so, there's so many things we could say about this. One of the things I love about this is that, for me, ideology is the name given to the whatever covers over the tensions and the contradictions of life. And so what satire does is it kind of brings out some hidden tensions or contradictions or hidden messages that we don't otherwise hear. And one of the interesting things about this religion is that it seems to bring out kind of hidden message within lots of religion. So you were in one sense just bringing to light a message that you can find. We were talking before we went on, maybe Joel Osteen or something like that. That is this message of you can be happy, whole and complete, if you have enough faith or if you think the right way. So I mean, is that part of the meaning behind this for you?
Completely. And it started off with watching Joel Osteen, and specifically a video that he talked about. He was saying, the terrible twos. You always hear about the terrible twos. And he's like, the more you think your child's twos are going to be terrible, the more they are. Yeah. And he was talking about his children, and he was like, my children never had the terrible twos because I did not envision them having. But it was just this idea of like the reality principle, just completely going against like this idea of human development, stages that you could just, through the power of your will, alter the nature of, and the kind of insidious idea of planting the idea that you can have good without bad.
Yeah. Yes.
That you can eliminate all of this nasty stuff, and have it's like a coin or whatever, that you can have heads without tails. This kind of basic idea. And then, like you were saying, then for the people that don't get what they want, on top of the disappointment of failing to achieve something, then you have the guilt and this, you're reprimanding yourself because, well, I could have had it if I had been stronger in my visualization.
I mean, this for me gets to the core of why I think comedy is a moral voice, in that it's not a moral voice in a traditional way of like the comedians necessarily saying, we should look after the poor, or we should, sell all we have, and whatever. But it's more that the comedian is able to bring to the surface the hidden messages that are all around us that we ignore, the hidden hypocrisies and contradictions. And the very act of bringing that to the surface weakens the whole, weakens the hold of ideology. So, I mean, the very fact that people would write to you and go like, you know, how dare you say we can always be happy or whole or complete. That's great, because you're going, yeah, exactly.
Exactly, right.
And actually, when you see religious systems or political systems that promise you to have, they'll never say it as explicitly as Parasphere, but they might say it. And so what you're doing is you're just going, yeah, this is a message that is everywhere. Every magazine is kind of saying this. Pop songs are saying it. You know, it's everywhere. And all you're doing is you're not morally saying you shouldn't. You're not doing it. You're just literally exposing it.
Yeah.
So it's
one of the things, as far as exposing contradictions, or The Secret, you know, when that was really big, one of the ideas, one of their biggest ideas was positive attracts positive like a magnet. And it's like, well, that's the opposite of what magnets do.
Yes.
Like, it's a negative positive.
Yeah.
But that was like, they were things, so that became like one of our big slogans, and we demonstrated, you know, with two magnets how, you know, and of course it wouldn't work, so we'd have to. But yeah.
Very good. And you've used the website still going?
Yeah,
it's all up there, so people can check it out if you want to become is there a name for people who follow Paris? Peerspherist. If you want to become a Peerspherist, you can just
sign up. There are two major holidays in Peersphere. There is Sindo, and that's the night when anything goes. So
it's like the Purge?
Yes, the Purge. And then the following day is Yeesh. And on Yeesh, you repent for everything that you did on Sindo.
Oh, wow. That's very good.
But it's offering both, so you can have the, you know, the freedom to do whatever you want, and then the righteous feeling that you've repented for it. So
very good. I'm sure I was watching something recently. I'm trying to think what it was. I don't know, but it was a comedy. But basically, the guy was repenting, or he was repenting in advance so that he could do whatever he wanted. So it's kind of the other way around.
Actually, that would have been great. Actually,
maybe you can swap the two holidays around.
Yeah, I think I am going to do that. In fact, I just said it wrong. Normally it's first.
Very good.
That's right. Yeah.
So you were doing that. You were writing for film scripts. You were writing for TV scripts. And then recently you've just completed you wrote actually a series of short essays, is that correct? Dirty Laundry?
Dirty Laundry, yes.
I don't have that, I would love to read it. What's that about?
It was about, so I run this personal essay show called Sittin Spin, which was created by Jill Soloway, and we've been doing it for 15 years now. And the book was some of my essays, but also some of my favorite essays that people had done in Sittin Spin throughout the years. And the idea of the book was that we tend to want to air other people's dirty laundry, or, you know, doing comedy makes somebody else the butt of the joke. And the idea, you know, kind of behind Sittin Spin is that the ideal piece is where you're making fun of the flaws within yourself and airing your own dirty laundry.
Have you ever looked at it was massive about 10 or 15 years ago, I'm sure it's still running, but PostSecret? Did you ever see that? No. Yeah, it was people would put in postcards of their dirty laundry, of their secrets.
Oh yes, I have heard it. I did hear of that.
And then they bring out these books. I actually bought 3 or 4 volumes of them because they were fascinating, and anonymously people would air their dirty laundry.
We did, when I was doing this show, Hell House, which basically evangelical churches have these things called hell houses, where you go through and there are different sins that you see. It's like a haunted house, and then at the end you see people, you know, suffering for what they did. But we did a thing in the kind of youth group room after, which is the conversion room that they have on these things, and we did pin the sins on Jesus. And it was like a pin the tail on the donkey thing, but people wrote down all of their sins, and we made a book of them. And it was interesting to see, you know, some of them were obviously comedic and they were silly and fun, but then there would be some real admissions in some of them. And there is that desire to be absolved and talking about like what you think you believe versus what you do believe. Even if you don't think that you need to be absolved for anything or think that there's still some idea that I want an outside something to forgive me.
Yes.
On some level.
Yeah. So whenever you did Hell House, then was that a documentary again?
No, it was a big haunted house.
Oh, you actually created the haunted house?
We created a huge haunted house. Wow. So Bill Maher was Satan, and Andy Richter was our devil. Was Jesus? He was Jesus. And then so you just walked through the different rooms, and we did it with the exact script. So the idea was we weren't doing an external satire, that the material itself satirized itself. So like in the abortion room, and this is how they really do it, it's a fully conscious young girl that's having an abortion, and then the baby is pulled out of her and she's reaching for it and blood spurting everywhere. Wow. Getting on the audience, and the baby becomes like a hot potato that she's trying to like get back inside. I mean,
wow.
So we
these are like higher budget, because in Icon, the community I originally was part of, we would do these types of performances, but you were like doing them in a much higher budget. So where was this, in Los Angeles?
It was at a place called the Center for Inquiry, which is a humanist organization that just shut down last year, or at least this chapter of it did. But because they were part of their mission was kind of to debunk or shine a light on some religious beliefs that they felt were harmful, and one of those was this idea of a literal hell. And other rooms there was a young man dying of AIDS, and that was
it was all again taken from real hell houses.
Houses, exact scripts. So the Center for Inquiry just gave us their whole building. So we had 9 different rooms where groups of 15 on a tour would walk through. And
this was popular? I mean, how many people did you have?
We got so many people.
So many.
We got,
over how many days? Just one day?
No, 2.5 months, 8 weeks. 10 weeks. So we did it for a long time, and probably 500 or 600 a night. In these different groups would kind of go through, but it was fun to do, because it felt like a little bit of a mission because of my background and growing up with this fear of hell. This was like this huge physical manifestation. It was like this like giant ritual for me. That kind of helps.
Well, I mean that's what it like. Even for me with Icon, again, a lot of this stuff was about me exploring with a group our pasts and working things through. And so
right
on all of the stuff you're doing with Pyrosphere and with the Hell House, then it's deeply personal in a way. It's just kind of like, it's not just you're standing on the outside doing things for fun. Like, so what is your background? What's your...
So my background is, grew up as an evangelical Christian. My parents were not fanatical. They were very reasonable. But I took the beliefs and just ran with them. And I first heard about the idea of hell from my Sunday school teacher, who said to imagine the worst thing that we could imagine happening. We were like 6. And I imagined my parents dying and it being my fault. I had, specifically, I had poisoned them by forgetting to refrigerate the milk. That was my... And then she, on the chalkboard, made a little dot and said, okay, now imagine 1 year of that feeling. Now imagine that feeling, and, dragged the chalk over the chalkboard. And ever since then, I had this... I was terrified, and I set out to just do everything to make sure that I was really a Christian, that I really believed, that I was really committed, would go to shopping malls and, assault people with the good news that they were going to hell and needed to do something about it.
What age were you then at that time?
So throughout junior high and high school. Yeah. And then I was kind of able to... suppress these ideas of hell and punishment, and then it's kind of a crazy story, but my sophomore year in college, after having not thought about it for a while, I went to see this art house flick, Akira Kurosawa's Dreams. Basically, it has nothing explicitly to do with the afterlife, but it starts off, there's a little boy who disobeys his mother and goes and watches a wedding of foxes in the woods. And then he goes back to her and he says, I've done a terrible thing. I disobeyed you. And she says, you can't be forgiven, and gives him a sword to put into his stomach. And I watched that and I just started sweating and my heartbeat started racing. And then there was the scene where there were these mountaineers that were slowly freezing to death. And I started thinking about what's going to happen to them when they die. And then I started thinking, what's going to happen to me and then it's very dramatic, but I heard this kind of yelping scream sound in the audience and realized it was coming from my own mouth.
Oh, wow.
And I ran out of the theater, and this is what my book is about, but I admitted myself to a evangelical psychiatric facility, which it turns out does exist.
Wow, yeah, I'm actually surprised. I thought I'd heard of most things. I didn't know that existed. Yeah.
The slogan was psychiatry where the Bible comes first.
And were they, do you know what their training was in retrospect? Were they professional?
There was a range.
Right.
There was a range, and I had a absolutely wonderful doctor there. But then there were people that were less trained and that were more... but I felt like I couldn't go to a secular place because they would just tell me, well, it's all bullshit, you know.
Yeah.
Get over it.
So what happened then? Yeah, so you went to that institute and what happened? How did that doctor who was good, did they help calm you and open up a wider perspective, or what happened?
So I had some not great therapists, but I had this one who was a real iconoclast, a real kind of renegade, and he told me this idea of Martin Luther's, which was sin bravely. It's the doctrine of pecca fortite, and the idea was you need to sin bravely in order to understand the forgiveness of God. And the way that he kind of translated that was, I mean, essentially, I had OCD. I can put it in religious terms. I can also, say,
you're either demon possessed or OCD.
So, he was saying it's just like if you're scared of flying, you need to step by step get into a plane, and the idea was, I am so scared of punishment that I need to do what I'm scared of, and that is to sin. And I was like, you're telling me to go out and, from a Christian, it seemed insane. But he was like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to assault, some elderly women on the subway? Like, what are you going to do? Yeah. What are you going to do? But his idea was that it was more important for me to be able to let go of this fear than it was to follow the law.
That's very key. And in therapy, there's an idea, and you'll know this, but for the sake of you guys as well, is that actually the prohibition not to do something is what generates the desire to do it. And so a true example I read of a psychoanalyst who was talking about this woman who was coming to the analytic theatre, and she was sleeping around a lot. She felt really guilty about it, but she still did it. And she was like, she was feeling, at least I feel guilty, because as long as I feel guilty, I'm not going to do it even more. Right. I'm keeping it under control. I would, if there was no guilt, I would just be out there every night having one night stands, sleeping around. I'd get in lots of trouble. But the guilt of my family and the guilt of my religious background, that holds it in check. But the therapist did the same thing. He was said, listen, let's work out the guilt. Let's get rid of this guilt. And what she found is as the guilt began to diminish, so did her desire to go out and have all of these one night stands. So the actual prohibition against is the generating force. And so in the same way, like your desire not to do anything wrong, it just causes more and more anxiety and frustration, and eventually you're going to pop in some way, whether it's in hating yourself or doing something that is damaging. But weirdly, sin bravely is this beautiful message of no prohibition, and weirdly then that's the freedom.
That's the freedom.
That's the freedom.
It's like with your short film with the chaperone idea,
oh yes, yeah,
right? That
yeah.
it's the prohibition that creates
this excessive drive. And this brings us, of course, to where you are now, because all of this stuff, and by the way, your story's amazing, you've accomplished so much and done so many things, but it's a personal journey. And so what you've done is actually written a memoir, which I've got here, which is called Sin Bravely. This came out just last year, is that right? Is it? Yeah. And I guess this is you putting into words a lot of this.
Yeah, what
this
my journey was, and how this idea of sinning bravely released me from many of my fears.
Because I feel like whenever we write, I mean, I don't know if it's the same with you, but with a memoir it obviously is, but often you're not speaking to people out there, you're understanding your own journey, you're understanding your own kind of way to where you are now. So is that what's felt like writing this?
Yes,
has it clarified things for you in your life?
It has, and I kept such notes when I was at the hospital. Like even then I wanted to write about it, and so going back over those notes was interesting for me and helpful in kind of releasing, because it's not like this fear that it's not like I solved it, you know, like there's still that little trace that I'm still working on, and to be able to put it as external and see it as, oh, this is what happens. There was this conditioning, there was this OCD element, there was this literalist interpretation of the Bible, there was this idea that we want bad to be punished, and all of this swirled around and led to me having this experience, as opposed to it being a total internal, like if you can see it as other in some way. I found that to be helpful or healing.
And that's, I mean, I was talking about this actually in a video I think I did the other day, but that or I was with Elliot actually on the Fundamentalists, I think we talked about it, but in psychoanalysis one of the things is like you don't go away happier necessarily, you don't necessarily go away kind of, you know, in one sense fixed or anything like that, but you're able to live, and you're able to live in a wider way. But it's like it's not like the answer is you go through all of this and somehow, you know, you've left all of this behind.
Right.
You've found a way to have space for it, to accommodate it, to not let the difficulties of life kind of like drown you or whatever. So it sounds like this process has kind of done that for you, this writing process.
And the idea of space has been a big thing for me. This doctor at the hospital was the first one that really talked to me about meditation, and the idea of, if you're picturing what your obsession is, if you can imagine it as being like, I kind of thought about it as being like floaters, you know, that you have in front of your eyes, there's so much space around those floaters, and the floaters don't eclipse the space. And just kind of visualizing as you were meditating or throughout the day of shrinking these and just letting them be these little wisps, you know. But space, it was a really big idea for me.
And I guess like it sounds like, I mean, the central thing that you were having to deal with was partly this sense of profound guilt or something, a sense of profound. You know, that's interesting.
Guilt, but also the idea that there was a pretty bad guy in charge, and that we weren't supposed to say he was a bad guy. Because, you know, churches would say, well, we don't focus on God's vindictiveness. We focus on his love. And I always felt like that was like saying, you know, we don't focus on all the people Hitler killed. We focus on how much he loved his dog.
Yeah, he did love his dog.
He loved that dog.
He loved his dog.
But it's like, that doesn't make it any better because you're not focusing on it. But letting go, like this feeling of when you create this, you know, this vengeful outside person, that affects how you're seeing yourself because your projection is projecting back on you.
Yes.
You know, so just the idea of just how you envision a deity. And then, I know you've talked about this a lot, but like with Paul Tillich, I remember reading him and talking about God being the ground of being. And it was just like, what?
Yeah.
Like, it was so radical. You mean we can even give up this notion of an outside? And I think you've talked about going like down and in rather than out and up. Or, so, but that idea was really helpful in letting go of, you know.
I think, like, you know, you're saying about projection, I think our images of God, this is one of the reasons why God's so useful as a thing, is that it tells you a lot about the person.
Right.
So there's an interesting thing where, like, that notion of God put into words some sort of feeling inside you, that eventually you were able to kind of work through. So, like, sometimes people go like, oh, well, I was given this image of God, but actually if we relate to that image of God, it's maybe because it reflects our own sense of guilt or shame or self-hatred, self-loathing, or whatever it is, and actually then, you know, you can see it and kind of work through it. But it's funny, like, this is like this title of your book is inspired by Luther. Yeah. But this is Luther's exact story. I mean, this is his thing. He was profoundly guilty.
Exactly.
Could never do anything. He had this vengeful notion of the absolute.
And then, like, the scrupulosity, like, you know, and punishing himself by eating like only mustard seeds or whatever they were, or standing out in the snow, and like it was like he couldn't go all the way. He reformed the church enough to say, okay, well, it's not works. I can't do it, but he couldn't go more than that. And
the big thing for, you know, just, I always like to say this is like, because it sounds very religious. You have a religious notion of God and God is evil or whatever, and you punish yourself. But there's secular versions that people punish themselves all the time. Like, there's people who say, I can't leave the house until I have tidied it to within an inch of its life. I can't go to work until I have done these 3 rituals. I can't, or else something terrible will happen. And they don't believe in God necessarily, but something in them is telling them that if they don't, for example, clean the fridge or tidy their garage, something terrible will happen. And, you know, so it's the same structure.
It's the same, and they might have, in a religious background, have, you know, put that on God. You know,
put that on God, and it might be prayer, it could have been religious, but actually in psychoanalysis, people are constantly going because they're like, I feel like if I don't, you know, do these strange rituals, that the universe is going to collapse, and something horrible is going to happen to me. And you know, it's incredible how that structure is sacred and secular. It exists. And so grace is a message that isn't just a religious message. You know, that's what anyone who suffers from self-destructive behavior like that, grace is a radical message.
Yes.
Is that anything, by the way, do you explore the idea of grace?
Yes, definitely.
Explicitly or implicitly? Or
explicitly, and my image for it, and I still think of this image, kind of towards the end of the book, I do something that I feel, that's part of my Sin Bravely campaign that I feel very guilty about immediately. And I just, the flush of anxiety comes up, and I'm driving home and I look out and there's this kind of dark purple sky, and for some reason, and I see all these people on the road doing and I just have this image of this purple sky as being a grace that's encompassing me and all these people I'm and it has to do with space too, the openness of the sky. But in my journals in the hospital, I wrote it so many times. It was my little slogan. Is I just wrote "Remember the purple sky," and that was that became kind of a visceral image of what.
That would have been
Grace
a great name
is.
as well for the book.
Oh,
In fact, for
yeah.
another book, I mean, I like it. Remember the purple sky. I love titles like that because you don't know what it means until you read the book. Yeah, I think you should definitely write a book called Remember the Purple Skies. It reminds me as well of what Tillich talks about because for Tillich, the problem is we can often not affirm life in a wide way that we like. So someone who is suffering, maybe they can't say go out into open spaces, or they can't fly, or they can't drive on freeways or whatever. So they can affirm life. Everyone can affirm life for Tillich. Even if it's in a small way, but it's not wide. It doesn't have the breadth. And for him, yeah, grace was in a sense allowed you to affirm life in a more expansive way. So I just, whenever you talk about space, I'm like, oh yeah, that's something. I haven't thought about that in relation to Tillich till you said it, but there is something about when we're able to experience grace in our lives, it allows us to feel that we can affirm our lives in a wider and deeper way.
Yeah,